Here's something that I want every conservative to remember. It's an important part of my entire political philosophy is we cannot be afraid to do something because the left might do it in the future. The left is already going to do it regardless of whether we do it. That is the takeaway of the last 40 years.
So tonight, Vice President J.D. Vance, if you did not see, delivered a speech and Q&A for Turning Point USA at Ole Miss University. This is an event obviously not just meant to honor the life and legacy of his close friend Charlie Kirk, but to further pick up that torch, right, and carry it forward. Subtly, I'm sure this is something a lot of people are also seeing as a quiet 2028 campaign audition on behalf of Vance. And if you're asking that question, how did he do? Well, I actually want to approach this video from maybe a different angle that other people will, because having kind of paid attention to the internal dynamics of Republican politics as of late and some of the quiet rumblings around Vance, right? Some of the disgruntlement from, say, the establishment wing of the party towards him, not super publicly, but a little more quietly. I'm going to say this right here. There is a reason why not just the Democrats, but again, also some establishment actors within the Republican Party fear J.D. Vance being the 48th president of the United States. And why is that? I think it's because, first and foremost, when you talk about a figure like Charlie Kirk, I think one of the things he doesn't get enough credit for is actually the fact that when it came internally to Republican politics, talking about the divide of the old establishment versus the MAGA movement, Charlie was one of the fiercest warriors on behalf of MAGA who would often confront and internally try to pressure Republican politicians to do the right thing. As a matter of fact, just months before he died, we covered the back and forth as he was sounding the alarm about a lot of RINO politicians who were trying to pass a mass amnesty bill for illegal aliens. Why is that? Because that is the old GOP, right? Pro-corporate, pro-business, and as a result, pro-illegal migration because it's good for the bottom line and it's good for the donors. And again, I think there was a hope by these very people that once Donald Trump is gone, we can go back to politics as normal, right? He will essentially be an aberration in history. And if you may remember, the initial scheduled successor for President Trump was supposed to be Mike Pence, but that is not the case. Obviously, now it is J.D. Vance. Now, let me explain something to you about J.D. Vance. For those of you who don't know much about him, right? He's just this guy from Ohio that's, well, is now the vice president, generic Republican, talking head, fill in the stand there. No. J.D. Vance does not come, if you don't know his life story, from, say, what we might call the country club GOP, right? Not these people who live a lifestyle that was insulated from the real problems of America. Their politics are mostly designed to keep the status quo going, right? Keep the foreign wars because that lines our pockets. Keep the illegal mass migration because that lines the corporate pockets, which also lines our pockets. No, J.D. Vance grew up in Appalachia, in basically the Rust Belt, middle America, right? He's what we might refer to as a middle American radical. That's a famous term coined by Sam Francis back in the 1990s, because essentially, right, he grew up knowing the real problems that this country faced and what the greed of our leadership and ruling class did to essentially sell out so many people who, yes, built this country. Sound very familiar, by the way, to the rhetoric and kind of the basic fundamental belief behind Donald Trump's campaign in 2016? It should, because what am I saying? J.D. Vance is the perfect guy to carry that forward. And yes, ultimately, if he does succeed in becoming 48, that is it, right? That is the final last stand of the GOP. They tried it with the old GOP. They tried it with Nikki Haley in 2024. That didn't work. If it doesn't work with Vance, boy, they are in trouble. Now, you may be asking, what exactly am I talking about? And why did you go on this huge divide of like, why, again, quietly, a lot of neocons don't really like Vance? Well, that's because I thought some of those ideas and some of those aspects of Vance really did shine in parts of that Q&A tonight, where you might just hear him and say, yay, conservative rhetoric. No, it actually is a little bit different from what you would have heard from Republicans 10 to 15 years ago, and I want to highlight that, and I'll tell you why. So that said, I'll tell you kind of my thoughts and my biggest takeaways here from this Ole Miss speech and Q&A in today's video. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. That is not only the best way to support our work, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And that said, if you didn't watch our last video, by the way, on the mass widespread abuse of, say, SNAP benefits and many things that American taxpayers pay for, not just from illegal aliens, but it turns out also a very broken legal immigration system. You absolutely should, but that actually ties back right directly into JD Vance's answer on immigration, because something we've been trying to talk about, especially on the channel as of late, is how while illegal immigration is the biggest problem obviously facing America, it shouldn't just be seen as the only problem. There's a lot of issues too with the legal immigration system. For instance, you talk about the H-1B visa program, right? Something that a lot of greedy corporations use to import like millions of migrant guest workers to take jobs, especially from young Americans in tech and computer science and all this stuff. In the last video, we talked about the numbers of legal immigrants who were dependent on welfare programs. And I asked the question, what kind of insane immigration policy would import a bunch of dependents? Well, you know, again, if you listen to a lot of historic GOP rhetoric on this question, it will basically go along the lines of, well, illegal immigration is bad, but legal immigration is absolutely fine, and we should just keep that up. In fact, we should increase the numbers, right? Most Republicans are very pro H-1B. You know why? You know why they're for that visa program? Because the corporations who line their pockets benefit from that, and then so therefore they call it free market while American labor gets replaced. But that is, of course, not JD Vance. Take a listen to the answer he had on immigration, and again, why I say the corporate establishment interests in the GOP are very fearful of this guy becoming president. If you don't believe me, take a listen. Maybe you'll find out why.
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate the question, and look, my honest view is that right now, America, thanks in part to the Biden border invasion, but also thanks in part to a lot of bad immigration policy, right now we have let in too many immigrants into the United States of America. That is just a fundamental reality. Now, look, legal immigration is complicated because we let in about 1 million legal immigrants into the United States of America every single year. And I think the evidence is pretty clear that a lot of those immigrants are actually undercutting the wages of American workers. It's one of the reasons why the President of the United States and a lot of us in the administration have encouraged H-1B reform, because if you look at the H-1B visa, what it's supposed to be is that you have a super genius who's studying at an American university, who's working at a great company. You want that super genius to stay in the United States of America and not go somewhere else. What it's actually used to do is hire an accountant at a 50% discount to an American citizen. I don't think that we should be hiring accountants from foreign countries when we've got accountants right here in the United States that would love to work for a good wage. Now, you asked about, I think, your girlfriend, you said, and I obviously don't know the full details about your situation, but my view is, look, there are people who want to come to the United States of America, and some of them, I'm sure, can enrich the United States of America by coming here, but we have got to get our overall numbers way down. Too many people have come into the United States of America. I am married to the daughter of immigrants who came to the United States in the 1980s. I do believe that many immigrants do in fact enrich the United States of America. But here's the problem. We don't even know how many illegal aliens we have. We don't even know. The best guess is probably 25, 30 million people. I've heard estimates as high as 50 million. When something like that happens, you've got to allow your own society to cohere a little bit, to build a sense of common identity, for all the newcomers to assimilate, the ones who are going to stay, to assimilate into American culture. Until you do that, you've got to be careful about any additional immigration, in my view. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, and hey, this is something we've been talking about a lot, whether it's H-1B visa abuse, whether it's the fact that basically since the 1965 Hart-Celler Immigration Act, the United States has allowed in more immigrants and people as a whole than any other human society in world history, essentially. And at what point do you say, look, we're not against these people, but there's kind of a destabilizing factor that this is causing on society, right? Maybe resources are finite in a sense, and when it comes to housing, when it comes to wages, when it comes to jobs, if you're a government, you should prioritize the people who already live in the country before thinking about people elsewhere, right? Or the fact, and I think maybe the most telling aspect of this all, what we've talked about when it comes to the New York City mayoral election. You're talking about a place where about 40% of the citizens, not including green card holders, illegals, and others, no, 40% of citizens in New York are immigrants. They are naturalized foreign-born citizens. And when you break that down by the polling, actually, the whole reason Zoran Mondani is on track to win is because among native-born Americans, Andrew Cuomo actually has the lead, but among foreign-born, Zoran Mondani is like destroying it. And then at that point, you got to look at it and say, maybe our immigration system, however it was designed to work, isn't really working that way. Maybe actually this is causing a ton of problems, right? And I think this is an opinion that is growing more and more on the conservative movement. But let me just say, not a lot of Republican politicians believe it. You know why? Because they benefit from the immigration status quo. The corporations do. The donors do. But there's J.D. Vance saying, no, like, we need to obviously restrict immigration into this country as a whole, right? And by the way, you think that guy is going to remotely let up on Trump's current policy of deportations when it comes to illegal aliens? Absolutely not, right? And that's what a lot of Republicans are hoping for, because again, a lot of the establishment interests also rely on that migrant farm labor. They're not the biggest fan, frankly, of the way Trump is going about this. But again, this is why I say the MAGA movement is in really good hands, assuming this guy ends up picking up and carrying that torch. And he's someone I would trust to do it, frankly, a lot more maybe than some other actors in the Republican Party. Here's another answer, by the way, of the immigration question that really, shows you how he feels about it.
Pushing out policies that hurt us, and these policies are not even solving the problems. These policies are just creating chaos.
Ma'am. Okay, so again, I'm gonna finish answering the question, and then if I've answered all 9 of your questions in less than 15 minutes, then we can keep on going. We got to have a little fun, right? So here's the thing. I can believe that the United States should lower its levels of immigration in the future, while also respecting that there are people who have come here through lawful immigration pathways that have contributed to the country. But just because one person or 10 people or 100 people came in legally and contributed to the United States of America, does that mean that we're thereby committed to let in 1 million or 10 million or 100 million people a year in the future? No, that's not right. We cannot have, I'll go and finish. We cannot have an immigration policy where what was good for the country 50 or 60 years ago binds the country inevitably for the future. There's too many people who want to come to the United States of America, and my job as vice president is not to look out for the interests of the whole world. It's to look out for the people of the United States. Now,
I'm glad he puts it that way too. And for those of you who have been on the channel or followed me like years ago, you might know about the Vice panel with the Asians and how we were arguing over Asian issues and all this stuff. And this is one thing I tried to articulate to people back then, because whenever you say something like, I think either we should have assimilation or we should, in the interest of actually like America as a nation, maybe it's time to restrict immigration and get tougher on a lot of this stuff. A lot of people get up in their feelings about it. They'll say, oh, well, I'm a legal immigrant, or my parents were legal immigrants or something like that. And then they basically use that as a pretext to say, because at some point in all of our family's history, most of us at least, right? We immigrated, therefore we should support unlimited immigration for the entire future. And it's like, no. If you believe, at least what I believe, right? Like I was born in this country and I'm an American, and that's the only passport and citizenship I have, then I have a duty to advocate not for some random person around the world who might vaguely resemble my family decades ago or something like that. No, it's like my job is to advocate for the country that I have a freaking passport for, right? And that's how everyone should feel. That's how American citizens should feel. That's how legal naturalized immigrants should feel, right? And if we're all to be honest with ourselves, again, the way we've approached immigration for the past several decades has not benefited this country, even if you personally benefited from it. Okay, fine. Now you're part of this country. Fine. You have the citizenship. You have the passport. Now you actually have a duty to burn the boat, to burn the prior connection and say, I'm an American now. We have to do what is best for America, right? So some people sometimes ask too, if you're a legal immigrant, how could you be against the current immigration policy? Gee, I don't know. Maybe because they burned the boats and they said, this is who I am now. And they're actually loyal to like their country. And they're sincerely what an immigrant to the United States should be, not someone with dual loyalty or someone who, advocates more back where they came from, but they came here as an invader, And that's, I think, a very important point. But again, I say, right, you will not hear a lot of this rhetoric from the GOP when it comes to immigration. You don't believe me? Like, turn on Fox News, right? See what the average GOP says about this. It's not the way JD Vance speaks. Very important distinction. I truly do believe. And, on foreign policy, same thing. If you're worried that JD Vance might be like a George Bush style neocon, well, I don't know. Take a listen to this. Tell me what you think.
People said that the president of the United States was going to get us into a multi-100,000 troop regime change war for Israel. This was 4 months ago. This was 6 months ago. Now, the people who accuse the president of the United States of wanting to get us into a regime change war for Israel, I wonder if they stepped back and said, you know what, we were wrong about that. Because the president of the United States did not want to get us into a regime change war for any other country. He wanted to knock out a nuclear facility and get everybody back home, and that's exactly what he did. So I understand there's some frustrations out there, but I think the president of the United States, more than any president of my lifetime, is willing to stand up to anybody if he thinks it puts the interests of the American people first. Thank you.
Yeah, just saying. But the last and perhaps most important point I would like to make here is that we shouldn't forget the context in which this is all happening, right? Why is JD Vance speaking at Turning Point and not, say, Charlie Kirk? Because just over a month ago, we witnessed a violent leftist literally blow Charlie Kirk's brains out, right? And I think, frankly, some people didn't get it. I thought a lot of people did, though, a lot of conservatives, right? That's a moment that has to fundamentally change you. Not in the sense that you're picking up arms or calling for civil war, but in the sense that, understanding now the position, the moment we are in as a country, the number one goal of the Trump administration in this moment, the long-term legacy ought to be, they need to crush the organized, violent, domestic terror networks of the political left, right? Basically, render that opposition incapable of trying to hurt and harm us anymore, right? And this is why, for instance, since the beginning, we've been saying RICO charges against Antifa. You have to bring these people down. You have to throw the book. You have to use the government, right? I even said about Portland, invoke the Insurrection Act, because you cannot allow this to stand. Not because I'm a radical, actually, but because I'm a moderate and I understand what's going to happen to this country if we ultimately fail in that endeavor, and then the shoe's on the other foot. And yes, guess what's going to happen, right? To basically everyone the moment that the Antifa lunatics are the ones with political power in this country. Now, that said, here's the debate we've gotten into. Is some conservatives say, oh, that's a slippery slope, right? If you arrest them, they're going to arrest you. Well, oh, wait a minute. It looks like they already did that, by my understanding. But I also look at it like, well, how can you watch one of our top political leaders, who, by the way, is not even a politician, right? So it's not some crazy, this is like a private activist, get freaking assassinated, okay, on national TV. Half the entire political left, maybe more than that in this country, can celebrate it, and you're still fearful about a slippery slope? Right? You're still fearful, maybe we shouldn't push the politics too extreme. Please understand, the entirety of modern Western history is always the same cycle. The left acts crazy, they provoke the right wing has to respond to basically come in, stabilize society, and stop their chaos. We never ask for this. We are never the ones who start the problems, okay? It's literally always the other side. That's why the right wing is called, quote unquote, reactionary, because we literally react to it. And the reason I'm bringing all of this up is to say that JD Vance was asked this very question, right? And I think a well-meaning student, I'm not trying to attack him because I understand where he's coming from, but he basically said, look, if you do all this stuff, if you weaponize the government, if you wield power in a way that, again, they've already done, but fine, right? Aren't you scared that when the Democrats win, they might do it back to us? And JD Vance, Again, understanding the moment that we are in and understanding the real gravity of the situation, I thought had the perfect response to that question. So take a listen.
I'm just wondering, well, it's not necessarily something you did wrong, but it's what could someone else do wrong? Let's say we get a complete tyrant in office, and let's say Turning Point USA is having a huge protest against, something really bad that we don't like, and let's say he's, a president is saying that it's getting violent. How can we, I'm trying to think, my mind's kind of blank. What is the difference between what you're doing and how could we prevent someone from abusing that power?
Yeah, so look, I understand where the question is coming from, and I think it's a fair question. And it's going to sound like I'm being sarcastic, and it really is not meant in any offense. But when you talk about what could another administration do, to take a wild, hypothetical example totally off the top of my head, what if Joe Biden sent the Federal Bureau of Investigation to start arresting his political opponents? Okay? So here's something that I want every conservative to remember. It's an important part of my entire political philosophy is we cannot be afraid to do something because the left might do it in the future. The left is already going to do it regardless of whether we do it. That is the takeaway of the last 40 years. And in particular, if you look at what we're doing, if Joe Biden wanted to deploy the National Guard to a red state in a place where the murder rate was twice what it is in third world countries to actually go after murderers, that would be a great use of the National Guard. Unfortunately, I don't think Joe Biden would use it like that. What I'm worried about, frankly, is what the far left already did with American law enforcement, and that is the thing that we have to prevent against. And the answer to that question is you make sure the people who did it face penalties for using the federal power against American citizens. And by the way, that's exactly what we're trying to do.
Oh, and by the way, in the vast majority of cases, it's not even a question of, hey, the left is inevitably going to do it in the future. No, they already have done it, right? And the question is simply, does the right wing actually have the courage to pursue victory in this current moment rather than basically be crushed by the evil communists who are tearing down civilization? And again, this is the cycle of history. This is how it always goes, but especially recently, you can see it right now, right? These freaking crazy, antisocial, anti-civilizational Marxist lunatics run around burning things, killing people, causing violence, causing problems, destroying the society, destroying government anytime they touch it. And the right-wingers sit around and say, should we do something about that? Maybe should we stop them, right? But no, in that simple answer to the question, like JD Vance told me everything I need to know about whether he'd be a good leader. Because you either, that's something very basic, right? Either you get it or you don't. I don't know how else to put it, right? And JD Vance, yes, gets it. He understands what must be done. He understands, yes, the gravity of this moment. And, I think a good performance to say the least. So I know maybe this video was a little bit out there in some ways. I focused on some things particular, but you want to ask me, like, how am I vetting Vance for 2028? It's not necessarily very basic kind of questions about normal conservative things. It's more of the wedge issues like this right here, right? How do you differentiate from normal Republican rhetoric on immigration or on foreign policy, or especially on this, right? The use of power. Because let me tell you, 90% of GOP politicians would have agreed with the kid. They would have said, that's why we have to be careful. I mean, look at them right now. A bunch of them are like voting against things Trump is doing right now in the Senate and all that. And quietly, a lot more are like, I wish he would go away. Vance is a true believer in the agenda, right? And so, I'm all behind him. But all right, with that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. Be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.